2025 transfer portal has been going crazy over the last few weeks, but it should finally subside as the window is now closing. There will still be a few more names during the second period, but for the most part, we have an idea of who the top names are and where they are going. In today's video, I want to talk about where the top 25 quarterbacks in the 2025 transfer portal are headed and just give you a brief rundown on who these players are. But before we get started, if you're a big fan of college football, be sure to subscribe to the channel, leave a like if you want to support today's video, and let me know what player, team, topic, or situation I can cover next. Now let's get started and talk about where the top 25 transfer quarterbacks are going. So yeah, it has been a couple of weeks since I uploaded, as I hit my main goal for 2024, and honestly, after all the college football content and just the crazy amount of stuff happening, I just have to take a break every once in a while because there is just so much going on and it honestly burns me out a little bit. But don't you worry, I already have about 40 or 50 scripts done for the 2025 calendar year, and we're going to be uploading a ton more this year, and I hope to be a lot more consistent. I definitely needed that time off though, and I was going to take off the remainder of 2024, which is just a couple of more days, but I have to give a shout out to the sponsor of the final video of 2024, Factor. Are you tired of grocery shopping, meal prepping, or getting takeout all the time? Well, if you are, then the sponsor of today's video, Factor, can help you out with that. Eat stress-free with Factor's delicious ready-to-eat meals. Every fresh, never frozen meal is chef-crafted, dietitian approved, and ready to eat in just 2 minutes. You can choose from a weekly menu of 35 options, including popular options like Calorie Smart, Keto, Protein Plus, or even Veggie. Also, you can discover more than 60 add-ons each and every week, like breakfast, on-the-go lunch, snacks, and even beverages, to make sure you are fueled and feel good throughout the day. So what are you waiting for? Get started today and fuel up with your springtime goals. Factor is cheaper and tastes better than takeout, and you'll get chef-crafted, restaurant-quality meals delivered right up to your door. For example, Factor sent me a couple of awesome meals, which included sun-dried tomato chicken and a black pepper and sage pork chop. Both of them were absolutely delicious, and they also sent me this awesome green juice that is so much better than whatever else I'd be drinking while I work. And those were just a couple of the many options that Factor has. I know a lot of people try to change things in the new year, and that is coming right up, so be sure to head over to factor75.com or click the link below and use code 50fisher, and you get 50% off plus free shipping on your first Factor box. That's code 50fisher or factor75.com to get 50% off plus free shipping on your first box. Again, it's better than takeout, it's pretty convenient, it's good for people on the run, and my grandma approves, so why not take a chance on Factor this new year and get good meals delivered straight to your door and start using all that extra free time to do other great things. I want to give a huge thank you to Factor for sponsoring today's video. Okay, so at number 25 we have Chandler Morris, who came out of the state of Texas and was a 4-star recruit. He ended up having a pretty crazy career as he spent time at Oklahoma and then 3 years at TCU before transferring to North Texas in 2024. He had his best season yet, throwing for 3,700 yards and 31 touchdowns, and with one final year of eligibility, he's decided to transfer over to Virginia, where he will battle it out with Tony Muskett and Daniel Kalen for the starting job. I pretty much assume he will win the job, but he will bring his 6,200 yards and 47 career touchdowns over to Charlottesville, Virginia. At number 24, we have Billy Edwards Jr. Coming out of Lake Braddock High School in Virginia, Billy Edwards Jr. was a part of the class of 2021 and originally decided to go over to Wake Forest, but he never ended up actually playing. He was a 3-star recruit and the 103rd best quarterback in the country, and so far had spent 2 years as a backup at Maryland before becoming the starter for the Terps in 2024, replacing Talia. In his one season as a starter, Edwards threw for 2,800 yards with 15 touchdowns and also had 5 more scores on the ground. He got sacked a lot and Maryland missed a bowl game, but he decided to enter the portal and flirted with going to Michigan, but ended up at Wisconsin, and he'll take over for Van Dyke and Braden Locke. At number 23, we have Marcos Davila. Coming out of Midland, Texas, Davila was a 4-star recruit in the class of 2024 and was a huge get for Ryan Walters at Purdue. He finished with over 9,000 career passing yards and 93 touchdowns, both of which were school records, and as I said, he was a blue chip player. Ultimately, Davila would not get on the field in 2024 despite how bad Purdue was, as they went with Hudson Card and Ryan Brown instead. Davila entered the portal and quickly found Nebraska, where he will most likely be the backup to Dylan Raiola. At number 22, we have Dylan Lonergan. Coming out of Brookwood High School in Georgia, Lonergan was a 4-star recruit and ended up deciding to go to Alabama. His first year was in 2023 with the Crimson Tide, and 2024 was really no different. Lonergan has since decided to transfer over to Boston College, where he will reunite with Bill O'Brien, and he will bring a pretty decent high school pedigree with him and should compete for the starting job now that Castellanos is gone. At number 21, we have Ricky Collins Jr. Coming out of Baton Rouge, Ricky Collins was a huge deal and was a 4-star recruit. He ended up originally committing to Purdue, but would later flip over to LSU and would become a part of their 2023 team. He ended up passing for 3 yards in 2023 and then 35 yards in 2024, and with Garrett Nussmeier coming back, there was no reason for Ricky Collins to stay, so he decided to transfer over to Syracuse, where he probably could have competed for the starting job, but Kyle McCord was given a waiver, and now all of a sudden he'll probably be a backup again and won't play until 2026. At number 20, we have Malachi Singleton. Coming out of the state of Georgia, Singleton was also a big-time recruit and was a 4-star player in the class of 2023. He would not play his first year at all in Fayetteville, and then in 2024 he got a couple of opportunities, throwing for 358 yards with a touchdown and 3 more scores on the ground. He ended up actually playing in their upset victory over Tennessee, as he came in and led them from behind and won the game. With Taylon Green returning, he saw the writing on the wall and decided to transfer over to Purdue, who lost their entire quarterback room, and Singleton should be the guy who should start for them in 2025. At number 19, we have Thomas Castellanos. He ended up being a 3-star recruit out of the state of Georgia and would decide to go to UCF originally. He ended up passing for just about 75 yards in 2022 and then would decide to transfer to Boston College in 2023, where he was the backup for the first half of the first game, but then would take over for the starter, throwing for 2,300 yards and also running for 1,100 yards. He combined for nearly 30 touchdowns and then came back in 2024 with a lot of hype, but ended up having a disappointing season, throwing for 1,300 yards with 18 touchdowns and just 194 yards on the ground. He ended up not seeing eye to eye with Boston College and would decide to enter the transfer portal after he got benched in early November, and has now decided to transfer to Florida State. I'm not quite sure if he's actually going to be the starter, but we'll just have to wait and see what happens. One of the most interesting portal players is Devon Dampier. Coming out of Tucson, Arizona, Dampier was just a 2-star recruit in the class of 2023 and would actually decide to go to New Mexico. He ended up having a decent couple of years with the Lobos, as this past season he ended up throwing for 2,700 yards with 12 touchdowns and also ran for nearly 1,200 yards and 19 scores on the ground. He became one of the best dual-threat quarterbacks in the country, but with his offensive coordinator going over to Utah, Dampier decided to enter the portal as well, and is obviously going over to the Utes, where he should be favored to start next year unless Cam Rising comes back, which I hope he doesn't. Up next, we have another guy similar to Marcos Davila, as we have Haas Heine. Coming out of Aledo, Texas, Heine was one of the fastest rising players in the class of 2024 at the quarterback position. He ended up having a crazy career at Aledo High School and actually became the number 12 quarterback in the country. He decided to commit to TCU, but this past season he was buried behind Josh Hoover and never got a chance to see the field. For some reason he decided to enter the 2025 transfer portal, and currently he's one of the top guys, but he doesn't really have much to his name other than his high school pedigree and his high recruiting ranking. As right now he has not announced a destination and he's a new addition. At number 16 we have a guy who I have to give a lot of credit to, and that is Zach Calzada. After being a 3-star recruit coming out of high school, Calzada arrived at Texas A&M in 2019, but wouldn't get his big break until 2021, where he started for most of the year and had that iconic upset over Bama as he got injured. He ended up transferring to Auburn for the 2022 season though, and never saw the field, and would decide to transfer to Incarnate Word. He threw for 2,500 yards and 19 touchdowns in 2023, and then 3,700 yards and 35 touchdowns this past year. Calzada saved his career, and for some unknown crazy reason, he has a year of eligibility left. He'll bring his nearly 8,700 yards and 73 touchdowns over to Kentucky, where he will compete with Brock Vandagriff for the starting job, and he might actually win it. Again, I have no idea why Calzada has any eligibility left, as he was a class of 2019 kid, but still, he's going to an SEC program, and good for him. Okay, now I kind of feel bad for Matthew Sluka. He ended up sending college football into a firestorm as he opted out after a couple of games to preserve eligibility and enter the portal. Sluka ended up spending time at Holy Cross before he arrived at UNLV this past year, but I guess he didn't get his NIL money in writing and he didn't end up getting paid, so he decided to opt out, and now all of a sudden he's one of the top quarterbacks in the portal but has no schools going after him. He has been in the portal for months, but right now he is not committed to a school, and I'm not quite sure if he will. He might have rubbed some coaches the wrong way, and at this point I do kind of feel bad for him. At number 14 we have Justin Martin. Coming out of Inglewood, California, Justin Martin was a 4-star recruit in the class of 2022 and would arrive at UCLA with a lot of hype. At 6'4", he had a cannon of an arm and always had potential, but he was stuck behind Garbers and DTR and only got a chance to play in one game this year against Penn State. Martin has plenty of untapped potential though, and looking for a new program, he decided to transfer over to Maryland, and both MJ Morris and Billy Edwards are gone, so Justin Martin should be the starter for the Terps, and we'll have to wait and see what happens, but I really like this guy. At number 13, we have Michael Van Buren Jr. Coming out of high school, he was a 4-star recruit coming out of the state of Mississippi, and was supposed to be the backup to Blake Shapen during his time at Mississippi State, but ended up playing early after he went down. Van Buren ended up showing a dual threat ability as he threw for 1,900 yards with 11 touchdowns and also had 5 more scores on the ground. He would shockingly decide to enter the 2025 transfer portal and will now head over to LSU, where he will likely be the backup to Nussmeier and will try to take over in 2026, I guess. Up next, we have Beau Pribula. Coming out of Pennsylvania, Pribula was in the same recruiting class as Drew Aller, and he came in as a 3-star recruit compared to Aller, who was a 5-star recruit. Pribula has been the backup the last 2 years, but has gotten a couple of moments to play and has looked solid. He helped them beat Wisconsin and was going to try to be the starter in 2025, but Aller came back, and now he decided to enter the portal despite Penn State still being in playoff contention. He'll end up bringing his 400 yards and 19 total touchdowns over to Mizzou, where he'll likely take over for Brady Cook and compete with Matt Zollers and Drew Pine for that starting gig. At number 11, we have Caden Salter. After being a 4-star recruit coming out of Cedar Hill, Texas, Salter would try to go to Tennessee, but would end up getting kicked out of school and would go to Liberty. During his couple of seasons in Liberty, Salter went crazy. He ended up passing for 5,887 total yards with the Flames and also had 56 touchdowns. His best year came in 2023, but nearly 3,000 yards and 32 scores, and the Flames had a good record. But after this past season, he's decided to enter the portal and will go to Colorado. He might be the starter for Coach Prime if Juju Lewis isn't ready, but I expect both of those guys to compete for that starting job, and Coach Prime will make a decision. To me, the writing was always on the wall for Aaron Noland once Julian Sayin transferred from Bama to Ohio State. Coming out of Langston Hughes High School, Aaron Noland was at one point considered a 5-star recruit, but still had a crazy career. He had over 10,000 yards and 100 touchdowns during his high school career and became one of the top quarterbacks in the class of 2024. Noland barely saw the field in 2024, in fact I don't even think he stepped on the field, and has decided to enter the portal and will go to South Carolina. Right now, with how good Lenora Sellers is, many project Sellers to go off to the NFL in the 2026 draft, and then from there Noland would probably take over. He's a really talented guy, and I'm excited to see what he can do eventually. At number 9, we have Walker White. Coming out of Little Rock Christian Academy, White became one of the top quarterbacks in the class of 2024 and was eventually listed as a top 50 recruit. He decided to sign with Hugh Freeze in Auburn, but this past year he did not end up seeing the field. He had 18 total yards, and they decided to go at Peyton Thorne and Hank Brown instead of him. White entered the 2025 transfer portal and has since found his new home at Baylor. He'll likely be the backup to Sawyer Robertson in 2025, but should take over in 2026, and he's a guy who is very highly ranked coming out of high school. At number 8, we have Jackson Arnold. Coming out of Denton Guyer High School, he became one of the best Texas high school quarterbacks of all time, and was a top 10 player in the class of 2023. Arnold would play in Oklahoma's bowl game in 2023, and would take over as the starter in 2024. This past season, Arnold threw for 1,400 yards with 12 touchdowns and also ran for 3 more on the ground, but had some costly mistakes, got benched for Michael Hawkins Jr. at times, and decided to enter the portal. Arnold ended up going over to Auburn, where he will compete for the starting job, and I have no idea if he will win it, but let's see if he'll live up to his 5-star status. Coming out of the state of California, Darian Mensah was a gem. Looking for a new big-time quarterback after Michael Pratt, Mensah stepped up right away and beat out Ty Thompson and had a terrific year for the Tulane Green Wave. He threw for 2,723 yards with 22 touchdowns and 6 picks, and also ran for another touchdown on the ground. He led Tulane to a great year, but decided to enter the portal and is now going over to Duke. It looks like Malik Murphy was kicked out of the door, and Mensah's the guy that Manny Diaz and the Duke Blue Devils want to go with moving forward, and we'll see if he can have a bigger impact in the ACC than in the American. Coming out of high school in LA, Miller Moss was a huge deal, and he was in the same class as Jackson Dart. Moss would wait his turn the first couple of years at USC before taking over as the starter in 2024, and that came after a huge Holiday Bowl victory over Louisville, in which he had 6 touchdowns. This past year, Moss threw for 2,600 yards with 18 touchdowns, but eventually was benched in favor of Jaden Mayava. Moss decided to enter the transfer portal and will now go to Louisville. He kind of fits exactly what Jeff Brom is looking for, as guys like Jack Plummer and Tyler Shuck were there the last 2 years, and Moss should step in and be one of the better quarterbacks in the ACC, and I think he has a very high ceiling. At number 5, we have another fascinating player, and that is Connor Weigman. He was a 5-star recruit coming out of the state of Texas, and Weigman would play a little bit towards the end of the year in 2022, throwing for 800 yards and 8 touchdowns. He had a ton of promise going into 2023, but after a couple of early games, he got hurt and would have to sit out the remainder of the year. Going into 2024, he was seen as a top 10 draft pick and a big-time player in the SEC, but after a terrible game against Notre Dame, he never really got better. He threw for 800 yards with 3 touchdowns and 5 picks, and Weigman was now benched in favor of Marcel Reed and would decide to enter the portal. He ended up going over to Houston, where he'll end up becoming the starting quarterback for Willie Fritz, and we'll see if he can end up saving his career, as at one point he was a 5-star blue chip player. For now though, I still think he's a little bit overrated to be a top 5 quarterback in the portal. Speaking of Malik Murphy, he was a 4-star recruit coming out of Inglewood, California, and I remember when he committed to Texas. He was seen as a guy with a rocket arm, but would need to be polished and developed at the college level. He played a little bit at Texas in 2023 when Quinn Ewers was hurt, but he would decide to transfer over to Duke for the 2024 season and became the starter for head coach Manny Diaz. Murphy ended up throwing for 2,933 yards with 26 touchdowns and 12 picks, but still many were concerned about his accuracy. Despite having a good year and winning 9 games, they wanted to go in favor of Darian Mensah, so Murphy was kind of kicked to the curb, and now he's entered the portal and he'll likely go over to Oregon State. Apparently though, there's a little bit of a gray area going on with that, as some say Murphy is still taking visits and may not end up there, but still though, if he ends up at Oregon State, that's a huge get for the Beavers. At number 3, we have Fernando Mendoza. Coming out of Columbus High School in Miami, Mendoza was a 2-star recruit, and no one thought this guy ever had a chance. Cal ended up finding a hidden gem though, as in 2023, Mendoza would take over at the end of the year, throwing for 1,700 yards and 14 touchdowns. He'd take over as the full-time starter in 2024, and this past year he threw for 3,000 yards and 16 touchdowns. At 6'5", Mendoza has ridiculous potential, a good arm, and was underutilized at Cal. He decided to transfer over to Indiana, where he'll reunite with his younger brother, who's a redshirt freshman on the roster in 2025, and he'll become the starter after Curtis Rourke had a good season. We'll see if Curt Cignetti can make magic again, but for now, Fernando Mendoza is one of the most intriguing and best quarterbacks in the 2025 portal. At number 2, we have Luke Kromenhoek. Coming out of Savannah, Georgia, Kromenhoek was a borderline 5-star recruit and was seen as the future of Florida State football. Jordan Travis was gone, and they had a 1-year rental in DJ, and Kromenhoek would likely take over in 2025. Except with how bad Florida State was, Kromenhoek would have to take over at the end of the 2024 season, and he threw for 500 yards with 3 touchdowns. It wasn't a great sample size, but he has plenty of potential, and based on that, and the amount of recruiting attention he got, when he entered the portal, he became the number 2 overall player at the position, and is now transferring over to Mississippi State, where he will take over right away as a starter for Michael Van Buren. At least that's what I think. At number 1, we have John Mateer. Coming out of Texas, Mateer was a 2-star recruit, and while at Little Elm, he put on a show, but he wasn't really getting college attention. Luckily, after committing to Incarnate Word, his offensive coordinator would bring his offer over to Washington State, and Mateer would enroll in 2022 with the Cougars. He was a backup in both 2022 and 2023, but he took over for Cam Ward in 2024 and put on an insane season. He threw for 3,100 yards with 29 touchdowns, and also had 800 yards and 15 scores on the ground. After Arbuckle ended up going over to Oklahoma to be the offensive coordinator, Mateer would follow him and signed a huge NIL payday, and he'll likely be favored as one of the top quarterbacks in the SEC and a 2026 draft prospect. So yeah, today we talked about where the top 25 quarterbacks in the portal are going, and pretty much all of them have found a spot except for 2. We'll have to wait and see where those guys go, but what do you think? What do you think of these quarterbacks? Who's the guy who should be in the top 25? And also be sure to check out Factor, leave a like if you support today's video, and check out one of the videos on the end screen. Hope to see you guys again soon, but until next time, peace.